Hi, and welcome to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat, and this is another episode of Behind the Sessions. Today, I'm talking about a little bit about what's going on in the world and how it is impacting moms and new families. And more specifically, how and that it is true that the current politics here in the United States and now also impacting the rest of the world from the United States are impacting our stress levels. There is no doubt that people are expressing this in therapy, expressing their concerns, their fears, their worries, their stunned response to how quickly things have been being dismantled that are protective of our health, our children, our children's education, our freedoms. And it is really, really having a direct impact on stress levels and how people are able to show up in the world right now and show up for themselves and show up in their families. We're hearing things, multiple things a day that are related to our healthcare attacks, really, on our healthcare, parental leave, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, as I said before, education, people's concerns about the economy, being able to purchase food, eggs for one. It's of course the hot button thing, but lots of other foods as well. And now the attack on our medications that we use and that we take for treating our mental health, for feeling our best, for being able to cope when we are dealing with mental health condition or physical conditions that impact our mental health, you name it. The political climate directly affects our daily lives as parents. If you've been feeling overwhelmed and anxious or helpless navigating motherhood and parenthood in these times, you are definitely not alone. I hear about it all the time, and I'm experiencing it myself. So I just want to talk a little bit, and there's so many things that could be addressed, but I want to talk a little bit about why politics feel so personal and the real effects of these changes that are happening and practical ways to manage the stress while staying engaged. So for some people are, involved in politics or keep up to date on things that are going on, and other people, have some distance from it. Whatever your relationship is to politics, and let me just state here, I am not an expert in politics. I'm not an expert in policies. What I do is help people deal with the emotional repercussions of the current life that they are living in and ways in which their past and things that have happened to them, things that are happening to them, are impacting how they function in their life and how they feel in their life. So, for a lot of people who maybe were able to have some arm's distance from politics, they're now thrust into this whirlwind and chaos that is happening from the current government. And so things that may have felt abstract before, people are having to learn, a lot about all of a sudden, but it's impossible to learn a lot about these things because they are complex, and the way in which things are being affected and impacted and changed are at such a breakneck speed that it's hard for people to keep up. And that, I believe, is by design. I mean, there is chaos right now. It's, drinking from the fire hose idea, but there are, I don't know, like 50 fire hoses at the moment. And that's how it's feeling for some people. Like it's just so much. And so the emotional response to that can be shutting down, it can be going into action, it can be a little bit of both, it could be anywhere in between. So the things that might have felt a little distant before are now right at your doorstep and literally right in your house in terms of how things are being changed and affected right now. And for other people who've always been involved, it's its own process of now having to figure out how to mobilize and stay active, stay activated, and continue to fight for people to have the rights, the services, and all of that that they've always had, or if not have always had, have fought to have now. Policies, especially things happening in health and human services, things happening with abortion bans and all of those types of things are influencing pregnancies, how we think about being parents, how we give birth, how we care for our babies, what kind of future they're going to be in, what are we going to be raising them in, at least in the near future. As I mentioned before, with these abortion bans and rights being taken away from people, there are a wide swath of folks who are directly impacted by this. Even though, let's say, I'm in California where people have relative safety here, as opposed to, let's say, I don't know, somebody in Texas, if they need a termination for medical reasons, or if they need to seek abortion services. In California, they're relatively safer. But for instance, like somebody who is going through IVF or trying to become pregnant, if they need to travel for work or to visit family or whatever, if they are worried that they could miscarry or something could happen to them where they need medical attention, and they're going to a place where they know they won't have rights, it directly impacts how they, if they're able to go on their work trip, or if they have to, what kind of stress that they're going to have along the way. If they feel like they can reach out to a medical provider, which medical provider will be safe for them. And even with medical providers that are trusted, now there's these looming threats of providers who are trying to, physicians who are trying to provide medical care for people being charged with any number of things. So, I mean, this is incredibly difficult and alarming for people who are entering into parenting and parenthood. And there is no way that policies and politics don't affect people at this level. And then, there's other things like parental leave, rising childcare costs. There are food costs that are impacting families. There are some families who rely on SNAP benefits and who need them, who are now either not getting them, or even Medicaid, who are not getting those benefits. And nobody, are in these positions are thinking or are hoping that the rug gets pulled out from under them. This idea that is now sort of being said and not being said by a lot of people, that we have to just plan for not having any type of government support, or we have to plan for what if the medications we're taking are somehow banned or taken away from us. It's absolutely, there are not really enough words for this, but the impact, the direct impact, the stress is palpable, it's real, it's there, and a lot of people are experiencing this stress right now. And we're at the beginning of this onslaught of changes. It's like been a month or so, and people are already overwhelmed, already feeling burnt out, already, or are stuck in a place of a hopelessness or confusion or helplessness about what to do. And there's no way that doesn't impact somebody's mental health and health, frankly. And the thing is like, okay, if you're entering into motherhood, you're in parenthood, there's already a million things you're trying to figure out, right? It's a big transition. You're learning just how to take care of this child, how to take care of yourself, let alone now needing to understand all kinds of policy that you maybe didn't understand before. like shifts in healthcare coverage and childcare subsidies and other things that are built to support families, not being sure that those are going to be available, creates an additional load, additional stress, more things to think about. Okay, so with so many things happening just in the world and the news, doesn't mean you don't also have other things happening in your day to day life. There are plenty of other stressors out there, and things being as chaotic as they are adds this whole additional level and layer of stress and worry. And then also, in particular, for people who have a higher sensitivity, who have a deep sense of justice in the world, a deep sense of empathy in the world, people who are, if I can say, like seeing and thinking multiple steps ahead, where this all has the potential to go. People who have this like intense depth of processing and feeling through things, just emotionally, this is that much harder. And I'm not saying it's not hard for everybody. I'm just kind of calling that out. And if you know that you are that person, then taking extra care, additional intentional action or inaction when needed is going to be crucial for preserving your mental health throughout the next however long. We all have multiple factors, many things in our lives that are pushing and pulling in both good ways and difficult ways and complex ways. And that can go from, inside your home, the dynamics relationship there, to what's happening in your neighborhood, what's happening in your city or town that you live in, or other community that you belong to, or communities that you belong to, state, country, world, environment, all of these factors that are impacting us. There is no way that we aren't impacted, at least in some degree, to the things that are around us. How we interface with them, how we interact with them, what we do to titrate or take measured steps towards interacting with these things in our life. Those are some of the things that we have, if I can call it control over. Those are decisions that we make in our day to day. And while a lot of people feel like we're just in a tsunami of stuff going on, what just feels like chaos, things to pay attention to. There's just so much that's so overwhelming. It is even more important to figure out how to take care of yourself, how to manage onslaughts of information, and how to be intentional about engaging and disengaging as needed. What I think is really, really important to note here is that you can't think yourself out or feel yourself out of the way of an ongoing trauma. So if you are in a state, in an environment, in a situation where there's continuous trauma happening around you, happening to others, happening to you directly, indirectly, self-care is cool. It is great. It is one way to manage this, how you're feeling. But I think it's important to note that you can't put pressure on yourself that you're like supposed to feel fine in a situation that's not fine. And, we can expand that to other situations in life as well. That's true in all situations where traumatic things, highly stressful things are happening. So what I'm talking about is, you can't ignore what's happening, and you can't be totally consumed by it all the time. You can be consumed sometimes, and you can ignore it sometimes to a certain extent, as needed, or shift your focus and attention elsewhere. But if you're in it and you're swimming in it and it's all around you, then it is something that's impacting you. And we do ourselves a disservice to think that it's not, or to not at least check in with ourselves about how it's impacting us and what we do have control over. So, what are some ways that you can actually try and manage whenever possible, some of the time, whenever it works, to set boundaries and to try and manage at least a little bit the type of stress that might be coming up for you in this very stressful time? So, one example is to try and stop the doom scrolling. So, let's say, like, you know, you're having a bad night of sleep, or you're woken up by the baby, or in my case, my dog for some reason every night lately. Um, Anyways, you're being woken up in the middle of the night, and you check your phone, and maybe you see a headline, or maybe you've dipped into a social media site and you see a headline about the next thing that's happened or something that's worsened. And you're immediately, before you know it, 30 minutes have gone by and you're angry and you can't fall back asleep. And now I don't know, you need to do something else to try and fall back asleep. Um, at that point, your sleep was potentially already disrupted, where you could have maybe had a hard time falling back asleep, but now you're in a higher level of stress. So obviously, that's not going to do any good for your stress level. Certainly, if it's impacting your sleep, it's going to be much harder to function during the day. And if that's happening day after day, well, then it just gets worse and worse. So, an option is to like make a deal when whatever your vulnerable times are where you're more likely to be the most negatively impacted by reading the news or doom scrolling, that kind of thing. If it's in the middle of the night, if it's right before bed, if it's first thing in the morning, to make a deal with yourself to try and set sort of like news free zones, or times where you're not on social media, or if and when a post comes up that it feels overwhelming to you, that and it's in this sort of safe zone that you've set up for yourself, that you put the phone away, put the whatever computer away, put the newspaper or whatever down. Or you could even set up a time, like let's say from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. There's no social media and no news, um, so that you can give your body and your brain a break. The news that you need to get to will be there in the morning, and you can definitely check it and stay up to date. But you can set parameters for yourself. So it doesn't need to be any time or all the time or whenever you pick up your phone or open your tablet or turn on the TV. And along with that, you can try and curate a little bit of what your news intake is. Like if it's important to you to get all the headlines, then try to find something that kind of summarizes the day's biggest headlines, or gives you a snapshot of what's going on, so that you can be informed without being bombarded, and then pick and choose the things that you want to learn more about or find out more about. You could limit your news sources to trusted one or two trusted news sources. You could limit yourself to reading through articles, as opposed to watching hours of like pundits on your favorite news channel discussing things. And there are ways that you can manage this. And again, I'm not saying that you can't do all of the things that you want to do and get all of the updates that you want to get. You should, but it's just about how. Because in some ways it's nearly impossible to stay fully informed on everything that's going on, especially everything that's going on in the world. I mean, with so much happening: healthcare, education, climate, economy, reproductive rights, mental health care. You can pick things that you want to be sure you're as informed on as possible. Like, let's say there's two two topics that are super duper important to you and that you want to make sure you're up on all of that, and then get bits of news on the other things. Again, this may or may not work for you, but it's just trying to help you think through ways that do work for you. And maybe what I'm saying isn't the thing for you, but hopefully it can help bring up some ideas for you on how to best manage this onslaught and overwhelm. Our energy is limited, and we need to be intentional about how it's being used, because there are other things that we have to do. There's going to work, there's taking care of kids if you have kids around, there's taking care of your own health and mental health. You have relationships with other people. You may have hobbies or activities or other things that are important to you. And it's very easy to get trapped in, especially with social media and the scrolling and all that stuff. It's very easy for time to just go by. There it goes, it's gone. Where you could get the information that you want and need without having to be consumed in a way that it is taking you away from other parts of your life that are valuable and needed. And that there are ways in which people can feel really helpless and hopeless during times like this, where it feels like there's so much that's happening and so much to attend to, and it feels so overwhelming. People don't know where to start. But small, meaningful actions, if you are action oriented and that's something that you want to do, the small, meaningful actions can actually help you to feel empowered while you're doing some of the good that you want to do in the world. It doesn't, have to be groundbreaking all the time. You could be wanting to stay involved, but you don't have, let's say you don't have a lot of time. Some small, impactful actions would be like signing a petition, emailing or calling a representative, sharing resources with other moms or moms groups, donating $1, $5, whatever, to an organization that's working on an issue that you care about. Even a lot of people doing sort of quote unquote smaller, impactful actions can make a difference. And again, just I'm talking really in terms of mental health, your mental health, being able to cope as best as possible. Any way that you can feel empowered that also, leaves you with energy to do the other things in your life is a win-win. And certainly there will be times where life is not balanced, where you are more heavily doing things for your kids or your family or work, and you can't be as involved in the things that you'd like to be involved with. If you are trying to figure out what to do and how to help and how to make sure we keep our constitutional rights and our freedoms, and vice versa. You could be like heavily involved in doing some of that and some of your other responsibilities, like work projects or personal care activities or whatever, take a back seat for a minute. You can't be in balance 100% of the time. But this is right now what I'm talking about. It's about being intentional to try and protect your mental health and try and stay as much as possible out of your own, doom and gloom or your own feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. Because it's really, I think, easy to slip into anxiety, slip into depression if you're not already there. If you are already there, it's much easier to feel worse and for those symptoms to worsen or for the feelings to prolong when there isn't something else for you to hold on to, for you to remember, that's outside of all of these difficult things that are happening. And sometimes you do need community. You need to be able to speak with like-minded folks, like-minded moms, have connections so that you know that you're not alone with your anxiety about current events. I would put one note of caution in there, though. Sometimes groups can also have, even though they might be working for good, some groups can have negative undertones. And I'm really trying to be careful here, but it is something to think about, anyways, if you're going to be involved in some type of group, whether it's in person or on social media or somewhere where you have conversations. You still have to, even if people in there are like minded, you still have to gauge for yourself whether it feels productive and supportive and there's reciprocal time in there and it feels respectful and the things that, whatever your values are, that are in there. And those places are available, online communities, in person communities, where you can get the support and find the support and talk about how you're feeling. Maybe even potentially they take action together. But again, it's about finding where you can, and this is not for everybody, by the way, but it's one idea in terms of how you could potentially feel connection and empowerment at this time. I mean, it doesn't even necessarily need to be a group of people. It could be one friend or two friends who really get it and who you feel like you're in this together. This is also true if you are in a family system where folks in your family have like different political ideologies and different ideas about what's going on right now. Sometimes that's even true within a marriage where two different, people have different political ideas. In any case, it's important to be able to have somebody that you can talk to and connect with so that you don't feel alone. I mean, the things that lead to depression and anxiety are feeling unheard, alone, unseen, isolated, helpless, hopeless, overwhelmed. And like, that's a lot of people right now, frankly. So, in order to maintain some semblance of your wellness, there has to be intentionality around how you engage with people and with news. And I think it's important to note that you don't have to be like on all of the time. Giving yourself permission to disconnect from time to time doesn't mean you don't care. And I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure to be on all the time. And then if you do take a step back, it means that you don't care, you're not fighting the fight, or you're not. It doesn't have to mean all of that. You are in your life having to manage yourself, your job, your family, your responsibilities. So whatever somebody else is saying, looking in from the outside about like, why aren't you saying X, Y, or Z all the time? How come you're not more vocal in these places? They don't know everything you're doing. That is real. Like, people don't know everything you're doing or not doing, and you can take a break if you need to. And there's some quick, like always have in your pocket type of little breaks you can take for yourself if you're feeling overwhelmed coming on. If you're feeling the stress of, you do catch yourself in doom scrolling or you hear some news that's upsetting. When you're in a state of overwhelm, when you feel angry, when you feel like you might be in fight or flight, when there's anxiety on board, it's obviously going to be harder to manage your response to things. You might have more irritability. I already mentioned overwhelm, but hey, overwhelm. Especially if you are somebody that's like transitioning between things. Okay. For example, if you're like a busy person or just at a busy time and you're transitioning from thing to thing, your attention has to shift focus a lot. Let's say you're done with work and you're going to go home or you have something to do right after that. Even building a little bit of transition time before you go into your next thing, whatever that is, even if it's 5 minutes to just take a breath, check in with yourself, notice what is coming up for you, acknowledging that, deciding what you want to drop or let go of or shed for the moment, and then refocus on the next thing you're going to be doing. And that is in a little bit easier because there's a much clearer transition between, like, let's say work and home. But sometimes people are at home. They're either, have a partner around or let's say kids are around or something, and they do get caught in a cycle on their phone or watching the news or something like that. And then you have to transition right away into parenting. It's possible that whatever stress you were in carries into the next thing you're doing. So even if it's just a 10-second slow down breath, even if you are mindfully breathing as you transition from, watching things that are upsetting to you into something related to parenting, regulating your breath is one way to tell your body that you are not in immediate danger. And when your body knows that it's not in immediate danger, the stress level drops a bit and you can be more present in the next activity. If that is not available to you, you can change your mood a bit by playing your favorite music, dancing around the house. You can journal thoughts that you're having. You can go on a brief walk, even if it's just a couple of minutes, 5-10 minutes. You could go outside and breathe different air than the inside air, or just open a window and get new air in the house. You can look at clips of your favorite comedian or watch puppies or something that disrupts and distracts you from whatever kind of negative, angry, overwhelmed spiral you might have been in. We need those breaks. Our brain needs the break. And we need to know that the stressful things that we're hearing about and seeing about, yes, impact us directly. Yes, impact transitioning into motherhood, conception, birth, pregnancy, postpartum, loss. And we need to remember that there are other things. Because if we don't, we lose our footing, we lose our grounding a bit and become consumed. And whenever you're consumed by stress, your chances of developing anxiety, depression, if you don't already have it, or those things worsening, if you don't have an outlet, if you don't have a stopgap, if there's not something that is a buffer for you, then you run the risk of getting worse and worse. So, for now, some things to remember are that you can set boundaries with news and with your consumption of what's going on in the world. You can focus or refocus your energy and your attention in other ways as needed when needed. You can take small actions if you're able to that can help you feel empowered, if not to just prevent you from feeling helpless or hopeless. You can lean on community. You can stay informed without losing yourself in the chaos of it, of all of the information. You can choose and be mindful about the news sources you listen from. You can vet the people you're hearing from. And your mental health, your emotional well being, your ability to cope is really important. It's very important. In some ways, it's everything. Your health and your mental health is everything. And if your mental health is impacted by this stress, it does impact your physical health. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of each other. And if you can hold on to and prioritize that for yourself in the day while also doing all of the other things you want and need to do related to politics or activism or advocacy or anything along those lines, you'll be better off for it. We have to keep that central and make sure that that stays on our list of important things we are attending to. So I thank you all for being here. If any of this has resonated for you or been helpful for you, and you think it could be helpful for somebody you know, please pass this along. I think it's really important to be talking about our mental health right now, especially. Always is, always, but right now especially. It's a lot, and people are feeling overwhelmed, and it's worth acknowledging. And I want you to know that people are talking about it in therapy and are trying to figure out ways to cope. And so make sure you've joined me over on YouTube as well. If you want to see all of the interviews I do or see me on Behind the Sessions, I'm there. I'm on YouTube. You can also find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now on Audible, and pretty much everywhere podcasts are played. Alrighty, thanks so much for being here. Until next time.